feel when your numbers go up and they hear you. They start following your message cause they feel you. Haters in the rear view wanna ruin plans. Don't be startled, they just low-key fans. They tight like bands on the fresh stack. Knowing Rolo runs the city, bringing hip-hop back for the 51st year with my loquacious bands. Now this ain't no love.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Rolo Runs the City podcast. I am your host Rolo. I know it's been a minute, but I'm glad that I am back. Of course, I've been extremely busy, and of course, we all are busy in this lifetime, especially if you're really trying to build something that is great. So, without further ado, we're definitely going to bring this show to you. But you guys know the particulars. Hit me up on the socials, man. Feel free to check me out. Facebook and Instagram at Rolo Runs the City Podcast, as well as Rolo Runs the City Music. You put up Rolo Runs the City, either or is going to come up. Feel free to enjoy both. And of course, don't forget all things Rolo, RoloRunsTheCity.com. And not to mention, whenever I feel like getting philosophical every now and then, I get on X, now drop a few quotes here and there. So feel free to hit me up at Rolo Runs the City. So without further ado, I definitely do want to bring this this great topic up. I mean, this is an awesome topic. One thing that I'm noticing that we're missing a lot now in society, especially in our current state of where we're at in this lifetime, in this millennium, you know, about a quarter of a way through, we're definitely missing our male figures. We're definitely missing that mentorship that young men get from the older generation, as well as, you know, just having their father pour into them. More and more now we're seeing a lot of, you know, single parents, predominantly, you know, females that are with these young men. And, you know, women are very great at nurturing. However, the structure of a man is what's needed to build that little boy into becoming from boyhood to manhood. So I definitely wanted to, you know, harp on that. So that is the reason why I titled this particular episode, What I Want My Son to Learn From Me. And this is a message that I hope resonates well with him. For anybody who follows me, who knows, you know, my son has autism. He was nonverbal for a while, probably about until the age of, like, I want to say the age of 4.5. He did do a little echolalia, which is basically repeating everything that everybody else said as opposed to, you know, creating conversation. Now we got to the point where the boy won't shut up. But anyway, I'm absolutely blessed and I'm grateful. You know, I say that being funny, but I'm absolutely grateful because I recall many days I've had conversations with him where I was the only one conversing and he would not talk back. So, you know, I'm very blessed and I'm very grateful that he's been coming along. But like I said, at the end of the day, these are things that I want him to learn from me. And I think it's very important that we pour into our children the way we need to. One thing is for sure. You know, me as a child growing up, you know, I didn't have, you know, the opportunity of having a great male figure in my life, unfortunately. And, you know, many kids that come from poverty don't have that, you know. I had a stepfather that was in the house, but just because somebody is physically there doesn't mean they're present. And it's unfortunate, you know, you go through things that you go through, but, you know, that's all a part of your test. So that way you can give your testimony. And of course you want to come through the other side better than when you were in it. So, you know, one thing that I was very adamant about in becoming a dad was that I wanted to make sure, not knocking, you know, my situation growing up, but, you know, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. It is what it is. You know, I came from a very undisciplined environment, unfortunately. Things were very chaotic, very unstable, and there was really no stability there. So I said to myself, if I'm deciding to start a family and build, I definitely want to be the opposite of where I came from because I suffered. So then that way my children wouldn't have to. And I thank God now, my son is as bright as he can be. You know, he's getting ready to go into school. He's doing absolutely well. Autism is a superpower. So he's like really great at like math and, and reading and things of that nature. So, we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. As well as I have a daughter that's at the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York, which is an absolute blessing. So, you know, I always think to myself that whatever I'm doing is never good enough. Like I said, you start feeling yourself and you get to a point where, you know, you think that you can rest on what you've done and then you no longer want to strive anymore. So that's something for me that I wanted to make sure that I didn't exercise. So, okay. So with that being said, that was the reason like I've been so calculated, not only with my life, but of course building my family. I mean, I want to talk about, you guys can think I'm weird all the hell you want. I'm talking about conception dates, as you're planning your children, everything. Um, I was unaware that, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I went through a pretty harsh upbringing, and my story is not unique. I mean, we all go through our crap. It is what it is. You know what I mean? Like, especially when you're growing up in poverty, we're all going through the same thing, you know? But, you know, I was probably, I think, in my mid 30s when I found out that my mother didn't even know that she was pregnant with me until she was about 7.5 months. And it's just, it baffles me. You know what I mean? I guess that's one of the reasons why I had this innate ability to just be like, okay, I need to be planning, 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 planning. You know, the thing there's a saying that says, you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And I think it's true to the fact, but I also take it as well as for me to actually put a plan in place and then execute it is actually God doing his work. So that's one of those things that I see. But that's why I'm very meticulous. I am the way I am. I hate the tedious work, but if it has to get done, it must get done. So that is the reason why I am the way I am. I've planned all my children. I've always wanted to make sure that whatever I've endured, they never have to go through that. So I say, hey, it's one generation that had to deal with it, not everybody. You know what I mean? Like we cannot, that's just how generational poverty occurs. So you definitely don't want to be in a situation where you are actually being subjected to that. Well, anyway, so, I like to just harp on things like talking about, building a legacy, be the example and, pass on your purpose. You know what I'm saying? And the reason why I say that is because there's a lot of people that don't realize that as they walk into their own person, they are legacy building and their offspring is their legacy. So what do you want to do to impact them? And not only that, but also with them carrying your message when you're long gone. You know what I mean? To where you got your children doing it and your grandchildren and your great grandchildren that you may have not even got the opportunity to meet. So what's the messaging that you're trying to get? What's the consistency that we want to display for our family legacy? I'm very big on that. And the reason why I guess I am big on that is because we never had a family mission as I was growing up as a kid. And, with my wife and I and our children, our family mission is, to be a servant, of course, to God, to serve our community, to serve the people, to be selfless service, which is one of the great United States Army values that actually we had no problem executing on because that's the nature of the business. So, think about that. Not only, what's your family legacy built on? What's your family mission? What do you want to pass down, for generations to come? That's something to really think about. You know what I mean? And like the way I look at things that I want to pass to my son, if I'm not living it, he's not going to learn it. Like they say all the time, this sounds cliche, but it's true to the fact. Kids don't ever do what they're taught. They only do what's caught. So come from a society where it's so much of do as I say, not as I do. And, we've seen, things like that, especially, if you've grown up in the 80s and stuff like that. And, you've seen people that will tell you not stop smoking and they're going, they're firing one up on the corner. You know what I mean? Like, how hypocritical is that? You know what I mean? So it's like kids are going to do what is taught. And I'm sorry, excuse me. Kids are not going to do what's taught. Kids are going to do what's caught and not taught. So if they see you, the living example of doing what you're preaching, then with that practice is going to be like, okay, well, they're absolutely about what they're speaking about. I mean, dude, I'm going to be absolutely honest with you. On all educational levels, it does not matter. Kids have a great emotional intelligence. Even if they're the smallest of the smallest babies, if they don't feel a great vibe from you, what happens with a toddler and you try to coddle them? And they're like, oh, yeah, I just want to see my little nephew. Well, your little nephew might not like you because you might be a dirtbag. You know what I mean? So they're going to cry and they're going to cry because kids have a great emotional intelligence. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a damn negative frequency that bounces off of you, but kids can pick up on that right away. So it's so funny because I use my son for example of who I should be around because he has a great emotional intelligence. Like if he's not comfortable with you, then it's like I don't need to be messing with you. And I kid you not, man. Like I've ran into so many situations and so many different people where my son has had a good vibe with folks, and they happen to be great people. And I think that's just one of his things. That's his like his natural gift. And for me, if he doesn't gravitate towards somebody or actually just is getting repelled, I'm like, yep, I got to watch out for them. Can't do it. You know what I mean? So kids have a great emotional intelligence. So one thing is for sure, make sure that you're being your absolute best. Don't be a fake. Don't be a phony. Dude, it is what it is. If you don't like me, oh well, on to the next. Who gives a damn? You know what I mean? But for most people, they want to be liked so bad that they're lying to the world to receive that attention. Why? If you're a piece of crap, then you're a piece of crap. Ain't no big deal, man. Hey, keep it moving. You know what I mean? You ain't lying to me. You're lying to the man upstairs. And for me, I'd rather keep it all the way real. So then that way, when Judgment Day does come for me, he will let me in his kingdom. I always think about that. I can't lie to people because I'm like, who are you? You know what I mean? Like I come from the royal king and the king's blood. You know what I mean? Like I come from the all high and mighty, God. You are no one for me to have to lie to you. So that's just my approach on things. Sometimes I hurt people's feelings, but oh well, truth hurts, but it's necessary. My son, he made me reflect on my role as his dad, as his coach. I'm also his learning coach who helps him out during school. He asked me earlier this month, he said, Dad, are we going downtown to Atlanta to pick up your bib? We're going to go to the expo. And I said, damn. Because ever since my son has been 3 years old, 4 years old, he knows that I've been running. Like, I do various races, not limited to Atlanta. I've gone out to several different, places, several different states, ran some half marathons in North Carolina, stuff like that. He knows that on every July 4th, Dad goes out and runs the Peachtree Road Race. And if you guys can recall, back in March, I got injured pretty bad, and I was very grateful to complete my Atlanta Marathon. However, when I tried to run that following week to do the Fast Break 5K in Atlanta for the Hawks, I had to shut it down because I was in complete disarray. I mean, I was just messed up. So, you know, with him telling me this, it kind of hit me because I said, I was like, dude, I got to shut this down for the rest of the year. I'm like, I'm hoping, Lord willing, I'm hoping that I can try to get in a race before the year's over. But, it's a stretch. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still going through the recovery process and still trying to get some things done, physically, of course, doing the mental work. So then that way I can endure such tasks. But it let me know, like, he's like, oh, but dad always runs. So when it comes to like taking days off from being his dad, I don't, because I always say it all the time, evil never takes the day off, man, and neither should you. So make sure that you're always staying on your game, doing what you're supposed to do, and being the shining example that your son should be. If anything, man, I mean, I'm going to be very honest with you, man. I want him to know that real men don't wait for motivation. We move because of our mission. I mean, if we're absolutely ready, or sometimes we're not ready, but we have to prepare ourselves. So then that way, when the time comes to man up, we're able to do so. And I don't want him to get to the situation where it's like the motivation fades and it's like, you know what? This is when discipline kicks in. Like, men are not going to like to do things when that motivation fades. But it's our discipline that allows us to keep propelling and to keep moving forward. So I always want him to know that, always staying fit, staying sharp, going hard, doing hard things, being mentally strong. I mean, that's something that we're missing right now with a lot of our kids, man. Like, people are losing. I don't even know if they've even lost something they never had. I mean, kids don't have grit anymore. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we do have many people right now that are raising children in fatherless homes. Now, don't get me wrong. If, you got a guy in the house and he ain't worth a damn, he's not going to teach your son anything but being a person who ain't worth a damn the next generation. You know what I mean? So if you have a man that wasn't worth 2 cents, then you did great by getting rid of him. But to extract children away from their dads is something that I frown upon. And I'm not accusing people of just deliberately doing that. Look, people fall out, but at the end of the day, what it comes down to is it's not about how you felt, it's not about how he felt, it's about your child. You know what I mean? And I think that's the thing that's really missing in today's society, is we get so caught up in our feelings. But you want to know something? That child didn't ask to be here. Okay? And yeah, evidently hooked up, had some good love going on because you brought him here, and now we think that we're going to be exonerated from the responsibility of bringing up this child. It takes two to create a child, and it takes two to raise that child to be well balanced. So that's one of those things that I always think about when it comes to my son, is to just be like, hey man, I want you to understand great empathy, things of that nature. There's stuff that I'm trying to work on myself, you know what I mean? But I always thank my wife because of the fact that she always sees me as someone who's a bit harsh, but she always gives me a great level of, hey, I understand where they're coming from. And I'm like, damn, 10-4. And that's it, you know what I mean? But these are things that I'm just trying to teach my son, is that he could learn great things from his mom as well as his dad. But the thing is, you need a balance between two parents to actually bring up that child. And I'm not knocking any women if they don't have a man at home. But I know there's uncles, there's several different mentors in your local community. Put that child around some men. That way he's just not crying because he's just overly emotional. And there's nothing wrong with showing vulnerability as a man. But understand that I want that boy to understand that he is a man expressing his vulnerability, but understanding he's still a man. As opposed to being confused because he sees an emotional mother, an emotional female, and that he may get those things misconstrued and think he's a female. And he displays the characteristics of a heterosexual boy. However, but because he sees a mom who's extremely emotional, who's very sassy, who has an attitude, he starts emulating that behavior. And that's not a great example of what we want our young man to see. So, and if you want to cancel me, I don't give a damn, because that is the damn truth. A man has got to be a man, and a woman has to be a woman. We are not equal, okay? For no matter how bad y'all want to be equal, we are not equal, okay? Because I've said this before numerous times. I am not bringing a baby into this world. Therefore, the level of pain and strength that a woman has, I don't have that. And I don't expect every woman to go up onto a telephone pole to go ahead and replace a transformer or a generator. Like, we need one another. End of story. You know what I mean? Sorry, I had to go there though. But the truth is, that truth itself is leadership, taking valid criticism or giving it, of course. This is how we become better. This is something that our young men need to understand as well, because a lot of people, just because you got a kid who's shooting the lights out at the ball court, he thinks he's just the man. You know what I mean? But as soon as you say, hey man, you're kind of hogging the ball, or what happened to spreading the ball to your teammates? What happened to actually working on the fundamentals, getting to the basket and shooting? Not everything's a three-pointer. I'm just saying in reference to basketball. And the kid may be shooting the lights out like Steph Curry, but he doesn't have the fundamentals. And right away, because he gets the ball in all the time, we'll say 80% of the time, you can't tell him nothing. You got to be stroking his ego as opposed to giving him criticism. But the whole thing is, what's holding him back is that ego, and that criticism is what's going to take him to the next level to be the complete player that he deserves to be. We're just talking about in basketball, but that's any facet of life. You know what I mean? But of course, we always want to preach honesty, integrity, and owning up to your own mistakes. That's what our young men should learn, as opposed to today's society, which majority of these young men want to keep pointing the blame on somebody else. They're always pointing fingers and not really taking accountability for what's going on. But yet, at the end of the day, and it kills me too, because I know the school system, especially here in Georgia, right? I can't speak about any other school systems outside of the state, but I know right now they have taken a lot of power away from authority. And these kids are running rampant out here, you know what I mean? And the sad thing is, they don't realize that with you not implementing harsh punishment in school, what's going to happen when these kids turn 18? You get tried as an adult. Now they've learned manhood is behind bars because they were never taught those restrictions in school. So that's something that I absolutely don't agree with, that we've kind of like took our thumb off a little bit from pressing these kids the way we should, but that's just basically things that we should do. We should be applying pressure, so then that way they can understand how to handle the pressure and know that there are repercussions behind their actions. So that's what actually saddens me, is to see young men falter the way they've been. I also want my son to understand, to know his emotions aren't a weakness, but not being able to control it is. So obviously, with him having autism, he has moments of time when things don't go his way because they're very monolithic, let's just be honest. But he's done well these past couple of years, actually adapting and able to become quite flexible. However, he still does have his meltdowns. And I tell him, I said, wait a minute, those meltdowns are not going to get us anywhere. We got to only control how we can control ourselves on the inside. The outside factors are not anything that we can control. So let's concentrate on how we respond to situations. But, yeah, You know, there's times that I've gotten upset too, and I had somebody cut me off, like bad in downtown Atlanta, and I wanted to get out of my car and do some things. Okay, and it wasn't I'm gonna get out of my car and speak my mind. No, I was gonna get out of my car and do some damage. I'm talking about like you yanking somebody out, and you know it's not a good thing. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'll put it to you this way: if I was a professional like wrestler, I would be able to live my fantasies of what I would do to folks on the road because I've had to go through my little segments of anger management to control the road rage. But, that all comes with doing the internal work, man. I've wanted to do that, but, I want to teach my son that there's strength in control. And you can't control everything, but you can control how you respond to things. And I don't want him to get upset out of external factors that he has nothing to do with because some jerk cut him off and almost hit him. And, obviously I'm a dad who cares about his family and do to me what you want to do. I don't care if I'm driving by myself, but when I'm driving with my people and I have my family in the vehicle, like then we have a freaking problem. It is what it is. But anyway, another thing too that I want him to understand as well, and there's nothing wrong with it. Love your people. Hug them. Remember that. But at the same time, you got to remember to handle business too. It's not soft. You're not being weak. I see my people, man. I mean, we get to a point where if we gotten beyond the particulars and we're no longer handshaking, I'm hugging my people. You know what I mean? Love is not a weakness. Showing a lack of love is. And it also shows that you're not comfortable with your sexuality or your own skin. So I have no problem with hugging my folks, man. Giving them a good embrace. Letting them know that I appreciate them because I don't believe in giving people flowers when they're gone. I give them while they're here so they can still smell them. That's just what it's going to be. All right. Being emotional is there's nothing wrong with being emotional just as long as you know that you can't let emotions control your outcomes. Okay? And when you're like emotionally unavailable because you want to act like you're just this, I'm a hard cat, not really, whatever. But I look at Bill Belichick, for example. He was somebody who didn't want to get too close to players, and now we're seeing another side since he's retired that he's like just this emotional sap toward people and toward certain players, like he loves Lawrence Taylor and all this other stuff, and and he's a big sap, but he tries to be emotionally unavailable so then that way he could just remain with his stoicism. And if he has to make the hard decision of cutting somebody, he has no emotional ties toward that player, so he doesn't feel bad for doing it. I get that, but at the end of the day, too, I think if he was a little bit emotional with his folks and he actually, got to a point where he did show people love and did what he was supposed to do, I think he would have never gotten fired. I think if he didn't push Brady out the door, I think they would have let him coach as long as he wanted to coach, and whenever he wanted to leave, he could have left. But when you're making bad decisions because you want to have this, and to me, I'm sorry, like being stoic does not mean okay, just totally ridding of all feelings. It's just knowing how to control your emotions and not reacting, but responding. So I think people really need to understand that before they decide to get into this class of, I'm going to be emotionally unavailable, I'm going to represent a style of stoicism. Before you do that, look up what stoicism is. Marcus Aurelius, read Meditations, great book. Anyway, but your name is your legacy. And everywhere my son goes, that last name's going to walk with him. It is what it is, man. So I want him to walk with pride. And I want him to understand that being a Carabello man, coming from the Carabello tree that he comes from, is about hard work, it's about dedication, it's about discipline. And last but not least, it's showing great emotion and showing love toward your people, however, not letting your emotions control your decisions and hurting you in the long run. So that's something that I definitely want to pass down to him. I pass it down to the podcasting community because people need to really understand that their emotions are leaving them in despair because they have no control over them. You know, going from people getting divorced to people having to go ahead and split. Oh, you're going to pay child support because you think you're hurting them financially, when in actuality, I know plenty of guys who are pay any amount of money to get away from the crazy ass females that they've had children with. So sometimes the joke's on you, sweetheart. You may want to tighten up on that. But anyway, I'm showing my son how to be a Carabello, a man, a leader, and that's one of those things that I want him to understand. So if you're a Smith, carry your Smith with great confidence. If you're a Williams, if you're a Ramos, whoever you are, make sure you carry yourself in great reverence. You know what I mean? And always understand that, dude, like, even if you're not a father, right? People are still watching you, And you got to understand, you have to be you just have to be your best at all costs. Believe it or not. Don't wait to be the man they need. Eventually. Be that man now. And I mean, this is something that's very near and dear to me. Like I said, man, like, our culture is hurting. And we've come too far in society to still go through the same things that our families, generations down the line, have went through before. Of people, dude, when's it gonna get old where it's like, oh, my dad's an alcoholic, and so I'm an alcoholic, and my dad's a drug addict, so I'm a drug addict. Oh, my dad was never there. And at the end of the day, it's like, dude, when do you want to break the damn cycle? Okay? Nobody's coming to save you. It is up to you to be the man that you're meant to be. It is up to you to be the example that young men should follow. You know what? You made a decision. It is what it is. At least a decision was made. If you made a bad decision, it is what it is. At least a decision was made. But at the end of the day, show some follow through. Do what you're supposed to do. Anyway, man, that's all my time. I appreciate you guys listening to me this week. I know my message may have come out a little hard or a little harsh, but in actuality, the way I always look at stuff is like, hey, my son is, flourishing, doing what he has to do, and I'm hard on him. And I'm going to tell you like this, just because my son has autism doesn't mean that I let my foot off the gas. Like, no. Like, we have standards here. And when people see my son, they'll understand and say, like, wow, like, dad really puts pressure on him. And it is what it is, I have a daughter that goes to West Point, okay? And my daughter that is the love of my life. I love her to death. No offense to my wife, but I love my baby girl, right? I'm in love with my wife too, obviously, but that is my little girl. Well, she's at West Point, okay? And I may have told her, hey, man, she's my princess. However, my princess knows how to put on armor to lead her troops. It is what it is, man. Look, y'all take care. Godspeed. I appreciate you guys checking me out, man. And feel free to check out all of my socials. You guys already know. And I'll see y'all in the next one. Y'all take care. Godspeed. Be the goat, never a sheep, and don't sleep on your dreams. Peace.